Yo, this is Alup. You got pretty big balls to watch Thorin's YouTube videos.
Right, this is another episode of my monthly Patreon discussion. And since I got a little bit behind due to taking on way too many events last month, thought I'd get it done this month anyway. It turned out for some reason not everyone could turn up, but we'll get this one done and we'll do another one in a week or two to catch up. So for this one, we're starting out at least with just one guest, and it is Zen. Now, Zen, since there's only the two of us for this one, on the other ones, I try when I can to just like chill back, let other people talk for a while, see what ideas they have to come up with. Yeah. Obviously, it's going to be a bit trickier with just the two of us.
Sure.
So let's just start with this. What are some, like, from what I remember, you follow CSGO and do you follow something else as well?
Yeah, League of Legends is main, then CSGO.
Right, okay. Well, do you have something League of Legends related you want to talk about?
Yeah, there was a post, I think, today or recently about where will Faker go? I think by Emily Rand. So basically laid out some options like SKT, KT, I don't know, someone in North America. What do you think would be the best place for him? Do you think he has to stay in SKT or he should be somewhere else?
Wait there a second. Let me see if I can find that post. Because like what I want to double check is like the writing at the beginning, like whether it's implied that it's, his contract's up or he's going to leave or something like that.
Yeah, it
Where
seems...
will Faker go? Let's see. Yes, that seems to be the right title. Right, wait there a sec. Let's have a quick look at what this post actually says. Let's see. Oh, that's right. So she says it because it says on November 18th he becomes a free agent. Right, and then so then the rest of it basically is just speculation. Like here's where he could go or what he could do.
Yeah.
Right, the main issue with that is it's like for roster moves, there's a big problem, which is that there's really two scenarios you have to figure out. One is like what will probably happen, so you have to know who the person is, what their history is, what they tend to do, like how do they make their decisions. And then the other one is obviously what you think should happen or what you would want to happen, which is like a very different scenario. So I would say the most likely thing to happen, unfortunately, is just that he re-signs with SK Telecom.
Yeah.
Like the problem is, especially in his particular case, because like if you notice, Koreans already are very loyal to the teams that they play on. Like once they're on a team, unless the team itself fucks with you and benches you and stuff, even then some players won't leave those teams. And it's not just about money, there's teams that might offer them a bit more, but unless it's something crazy, the problem is it's so much more stressful to uproot yourself and go to another team. And even then, you'll have that whole thing of like, if you didn't succeed immediately, all the fans will fucking hate on you. It's like there's so many negatives that don't really exist in the same way, I think, in the West. Mm-hmm. That I think, unfortunately, it's most like he just goes to SK Telecom. Then you have to look at the fact that the other factor that made people previously leave Korea was usually money. And obviously that's actually the one area where SK Telecom, based on the reports we read, was actually doing a very good job. In fact, actually, there's pretty decent speculation, I think, that the reason why their team this year was terrible is because they just had all the budget spent on Faker and then they just tried to get rookies, Like, I don't think they legitimately thought that, like, Tal and Blossom were the best players. I think they probably just had to gamble on rookies and hope they got some good players. So, sadly, the boring answer is probably straight to just SK Telecom again. And in fact, in the kind of Korean esports world, I doubt he even gets to have much discussion with them about like, who else would be on the team, etc. If you go there, you just kind of trust that the people who are your coaches are going to get you good players. Like one of the most fucked up things I find when you read interviews with Koreans is they'll talk about every season almost the way like a fan would, where they don't even consider who's on their team. Like I've seen them say stuff like, last year we were very good and this year we didn't do well. It's like, what the fuck? Like two different players on your team last year. Like it's not a coincidence, is it, mate? You're not just playing worse. Like that guy isn't even on your team. So if you want like a one for where he could go, that's a tough one, because the problem is, like, again, if you're just a Western fan, you might think, oh, maybe he'll go to a really good Korean team. Like maybe he goes to a Freak of Freaks or something, joins some sick KT roster. Maybe he makes the super team. But I think that's actually even less likely, unfortunately. Like, I think if he stays in Korea, he probably just stays on SK Telecom. The only outside chance I would give personally is maybe he considers going to China. But the reason why I feel like that's not such a good move is because going to China is essentially just a money play. Like, there's not many players who've done it because they, like, again, they didn't know who they were going to be on a team with there. So he could do it for the money, but I actually feel like for Faker, especially because he got the money in this last contract, the number one goal probably should still be trying to win championships. So as bizarre as it sounds, I think that he just stays in SK Telecom and hopes that they build him a championship team again, which personally I wouldn't expect to happen, but you can't blame. It's a bit like, you know, in CSGO when Virtus.pro just refused to make player changes for like 4 years or something, even when they were starting to have dips. Well, it's like the reason why I couldn't really diss them at the time is because they were kind of right, you know, they did get back to the top again and again. So it's like, in there, I can see why, like, they had a feedback loop telling them that they were succeeding when they did this approach. And if you're Faker, you've only had 2 bad years ever. So unfortunately, in your mind, you probably do still think, oh, you know, we'll get a player this season, or even worse. There's another thing that's quite depressing about Koreans. The reason why some of the LCK talents waste their careers is also because they like trust in their teammates and the concept of improvement, which I personally don't believe in, actually. Like, it might sound like a mad concept, but I think you can improve a bit. But I think when you've played enough years, you're not just going to get like 50% better. Unfortunately, they believe that shit. Like, they think, you know, no, my team will practice very hard, and, you know, if we keep coaching him, and they're a bit delusional in that sense, unfortunately. What do you think? Do you think there's a team that would be a logical one for him to go to? Either like one that he could go to, maybe, I'm sure there's some I haven't thought of, or maybe one that's like,
yeah, I think KT is the most obvious Korean team that shown willingness to spend a lot of money and get the stars and play that way. I do think SKT has been way too long out of the top, and that's the problem in League, where you just have Worlds once a year, whereas at least with VP they could shit, you know, 10 tournaments in a row, but then they could also win 2 tournaments in a row, whereas SKT, it feels like forever. That I don't think he can waste another year. Will he still be as good in a year? I think it seems a big risk. So I think it would make sense for him to move, unless they do get the big stars. I mean, I don't see SKT turning it around, but they have done it in the past. So
sure. Yeah, part of the problem with that is like, yeah, first of all, if you think about it, unfortunately, in Faker's mind, again, just from knowing pro players, one thing that's not actually ever entering his brain is like, oh, maybe I'll just, you know, maybe this is like my window's closing and next year I won't be as good. Unfortunately, you can only really look at the world from that kind of perspective if you're not the player.
Yeah.
Because players just, for whatever reason, they just believe, you know, however good they are tomorrow is going to be based on how good they are today. And if anything, they want to believe naively they're going to keep getting better and better and better. That's why if you ever follow any traditional sport, and you're the sort of fan I am, where you've watched a lot of different games, one thing that will tilt the fuck out of you is they love to push this narrative that, like, when a really, really great sports star is really old, that he's, like, better than ever at the old age than he was at his prime. So, like, I'm not even joking, mate. When Roger Federer won the Australian Open last year at, like, age 36 or something, there were people who were, like, you know, on the TV broadcast being like, he's better than ever. It's like, he definitely isn't. Like, you know, if we could take him back in time and have him play his, like, physical prime of, like, 27, he'd batter him completely. Like, there's no chance the 36-year-old Federer wins that match. But, like, I know what they mean. What they really mean there is, like, you know, whatever you lose in athleticism, maybe you make up for in, like, experience and understanding of the game. But you have to be real. There is definitely a sweet spot that you hit, that after that point, it doesn't matter how much experience you get, the drop off of, like, your physical abilities is going to be so degrading. You're just never going to be as good again. So I know in League, like, here's the thing that's crazy about esports games is, in theory, it should never happen in esports games because we haven't made the games go long enough. Mm-hmm. Like, in theory, what's happening in Counter-Strike now is about the closest to a reasonable career span you can even think of. Because as much as people will think, like, you know, someone like Forrest and whatever having like 15 years seems like too little time. It's like, we don't really know that though, because there is still a physical component. You are still wrecking your wrist over and over and over again. So, I mean, you know, in sports like the NFL where you wreck one part of your body over, that you can last 10 years there. So, yeah, I agree with you. If I were him, what I would be thinking is 2 options. I'd either think I need to win the championship again this year for whatever reason. You know, maybe he's still super into League of Legends. Seems like he is. In which case, yeah, what you need to do realistically is get to a fucking super Korean team. But again, there's that kind of like cultural taboos on that, unfortunately. Like, if you notice, you don't tend to see a lot of like roster moves within LCK that are like massive blockbusters, or if you do, it's when it's the newer orgs. So it is the Rox Tigers, the Long Jews of the world. It's not the established ones. And so there's also the angle that I don't know if this would still apply for Faker, but if you remember when they made the KT Super Team, supposedly it was like this. Supposedly they asked Smeb to join SK Telecom and he said no, because he actually didn't want to join and feel like, I'm just riding Faker's coattails to win the championship. I want to beat him and win the championship, which is a very admirable goal. But then interestingly on the other end, I think it was implied that like Mata wanted to join SK Telecom, but then instead SK Telecom turned him down and he went to KT Rolster. So it's probably even a mixed bag as to whether they would want Faker, bizarrely. Like, I don't know in their minds whether or not him doing badly last year resets that whole thing and then they don't worry about, whether or not he's still the one that they be riding the coattails of. I've never really understood that angle of like riding coattails personally. Like, I kind of get it in terms of like KT, because I do think they would have actually sacrificed their own legacy if they'd have won to have that many good players in one team. But, like, put it this way, if you're talking about Faker, we have to have someone good with him. At the moment he's got almost no one, has he? So, like, what's he doing? Trying to do the ultimate anti-coattail riding if he wins now.
Is doing the simple.
Which, as we see, doesn't even work for fucking simple, but that's a game where you can hard carry, sadly. The sad thing is, if you think about it, probably the ultimate irony is, as fucking shit as that SK Telecom team was last year, if you could somehow have put them in Worlds this year, they could have actually been all right if you think about the players that they had. They still had like Blank was still half decent, Peanut could still play it, they had the solo laners. That would actually have been a half decent team. Obviously, you never would get there, but just hypothetically. What about this then? If you could send Faker to a team, because I noticed in that article, like half of this is because Fion was writing part of it, and half of it's because it's a Western website. So obviously they speculate he's going to join like Western teams, which is like, to me, an utterly ludicrous premise. The only player I'm actually aware of who joined a Western team, not just for money, who was actually good, was Spirit when he joined Fnatic, where for some bizarre reason, I don't know why, he just did actually legit want to play for a team like Fnatic, which is very kind of an unusual motivation, really. If you look at people like Someday, they aren't playing in these teams because they think that like this is great for their career. They just want to get a massive payday, basically. So I don't really see why Faker would sign with a Western team. But okay, what if you could pick like is there a Chinese team you would like to see him play for?
I mean, I would have said IG if they hadn't won, because I always thought that they were, very good during the season, but they weren't very clutch, and Faker is very clutch. But now that they won, it seems a bit silly. That rookie is supposedly the best player in the world. So, I guess basically anyone who has some other very good player to play with him. Actually, what you said, if Mata was willing to join SKT, that would be, obviously maybe not now, but that would have been a very interesting team.
Sure.
Just Faker and Mata and 3 rookies. That could be great. But yeah,
one thing I think is kind of funny about this Worlds is that, I don't know, everyone's forgotten this narrative, but one of the whole narratives, because it was RNG was the team that was on top all year, one of the narratives was like, see, Korea, like, China never should have imported players. It's all about having 5 Chinese players. I noticed that narrative. You couldn't even fucking find anyone who subscribed to that narrative now that IG won, with that being totally hard carried by like solo lane Korean stars. Like, I love how people just completely abandon one that they don't like and then pretend like, what do you mean? I never thought that. It's like, are you for real? Come on, man.
Yeah.
Classic. Let me think. I do think that's interesting though, because I actually am amazed that they would even that news would even get out, that his contract ends soon, but it's not yet, and that it is going to end. I would have thought, I guess that's the other angle, right? You would think if it's SK Telecom wants him again, then they would announce it a little bit earlier, so there's no like speculation or people putting in big bids for him, etc. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
there's also a world, by the way.
Steve knows, and
I've no doubt there'll be some people.
Pressuring.
Some people will make bids, no doubt, if he's available in any sense. Like the Chinese teams, I've no doubt will do it again. Mm-hmm. It's just that the other thing that's interesting about that move to me is that I guess you have to also consider a world in which SK Telecom decides it's actually not worth having Faker, because if the amount that they were, if they claimed it was millions over years, that's a waste of money. I'll tell you right now, you're not ever going to make your money back on that. So it's actually not worth it. So I don't know what the situation, because obviously you'd probably have to know where SK Telecom was at as a company to want to keep spending budget. But if you add in, as bizarre as it sounds, because he didn't win, again, there's a lot of idiots, and I guarantee a lot of Korean people think this way, who literally will write the story as like, oh, Faker had a bad year last year. Yeah, he didn't play well. And like, so that, in their mind, that's how it'll be. So I guess, yeah, there's a world in which maybe he just leaves because they don't want him anymore. Certainly, it would be obviously the hottest move ever if he did actually leave.
Yeah. I mean, he could be, solo carrying in some places and not playing Tariq mid with blank Master E or something.
That's probably the biggest regret I have about this 2018 for SK Telecom. It's one thing that they sucked and that they were like barely a playoff team and they weren't really ever going to win LCK. The worst thing for me is that you had these metas where they were playing really badly and they just kept doing that fucking vacuum pressure style to try and help like bad players be able to get in the game. And it's like they went too far with it. They made Faker like, the difference is before it was genius. It's like when Simple replaces Zeus on CT Mirage in B. So you can't just abuse Zeus all the time, right? You have to actually play straight up and sometimes go to his side, sometimes go to another one. Right? Yeah. That's what Faker was basically doing. But this is like you just did that and told him to do it for like 3 players. And so, well, that won't work. He has to actually just have teammates. So the saddest thing is there were so many times this year where you could actually play carries mid and they didn't even put him on him, mate. Like you could have at least let him pop off a few times and see what that looked like. Yeah. But for some reason they did that like literally maybe 2 or 3 times ever. I think there was maybe like one Kassadin game I remember that was about it. Other than that, even when you couldn't play the funnel meta, they often weren't even funneling into him. So yeah. I don't know, that alone was depressing because, like at least if someone's a good player, you want to see them play well even if the team does badly.
Yeah.
What else in League of Legends? What do you think of Invictus Gaming winning Worlds? Were you one of these people who thought Fnatic was going to do it?
I mean, I am European, so I did have that hope. I actually, in the beginning of playoffs, I was hoping KT would do it, and after KT lost, I thought it was a bit in the air that anyone could do it, but apparently not. I mean, IG seemed to be much better. I think it was great that they didn't choke as they usually did in past Chinese playoffs. That was my fear because I always like teams like IG and Rogue Warriors that had great regular season records, but then somehow they don't make it. I know you prefer like clutch teams that make it well in the finals, but yeah, it's just I don't know. It was a bit strange worlds, especially because Korea sucked so much.
Sure.
What do you think about the future of Korea now? Do you think is it about the new guys now that they play for the whole year? Will they be the ones going to the World Championship? Is it KT maybe coming back? Is it SKT rebuilding? Or is Korea not coming to the top again?
I think for me, it's almost certain Korea does become the best region again. Because, I mean, if you look at it, like I made the joke on Twitter that for me, Korea just did fucking win Worlds. Like the real reason that IG won was arguably the 2 best players in the tournament were on their team. Yeah. It's actually ridiculous. So, and they're both Korean. So, transfer those to some Korean teams. What you tell me, Korea still sucks at it? I don't think so. Like, it's actually ridiculous that we already considered Korea like impossibly dominant, and that's with all these fucking import players that were out there. Like, what? It's the same argument that always never made any sense for idiots from NA. Like, first of all, they were counting European players as NA players while talking shit on Europeans. And then secondly, they'll say dumb stuff like, oh, but Europe has more players. Yeah, and you have half the fucking players in your league, you dumb fuck. What are you talking about? Like, how's this a fair comparison? Put all the players back on Europe, then let's have a tournament where it's just NA players, shall we? So along those lines, I already think it's a bit overblown that Korea sucks, Like, if RNG won, yeah, maybe that'd make it seem a bit different. Mm-hmm. But I also have the issue that, like, first of all, I don't really buy the results of Worlds. Yeah. Like I actually think Fnatic is, this will sound weird, I think Fnatic actually is hard done by Worlds, because since they could have, first of all, used SOAS sometimes and played very differently, they could actually still have been one of the top 4 teams at Worlds in a different meta that way harder for everyone else. Yeah. So I think, if anything, the Clown Fiesta meta that you got here actually made it better for some teams. And yeah, Fnatic looked like they benefited, but I don't know if they did really. Like, I actually think they could have done just as well otherwise. People like G2 and Cloud9, I don't think there's any world personally in which they're doing that in any other meta. Yeah. So that's my problem as well, is it's not like this meta is going to exist next year for Worlds. Like, odds are when Riot changes almost anything, as you see, they always change stuff so significantly that you can never predict what the outcome of the patch is. Yeah. So I think it's very unlikely we have this kind of a meta in the future. So all of a sudden, everyone's saying, like, why are Koreans still playing this like control vision stats? Like that, I bet I wouldn't be surprised if in 6 months from now all the top teams are Koreans again. They're just shitting on everyone and they just dominate MSI and look amazing. Like, why not? Mm-hmm. Like, I understand why Chinese teams can beat them. They've got players that are as good, in my opinion. I don't think that the Koreans are going to have like a performance ever as bad as this. I even think you have to look at it, and if you're being fair, they also got pretty fucking unlucky with the bracket. Like KT was on a killer half of the bracket anyway. Even if they didn't lose to IG, they were going to, in theory, be playing RNG in the semis. So that's a pretty fucking hard bracket considering you won your group.
Yeah, it was dream brackets for Western.
It's brutal. So this is almost, with almost no exaggeration, I think this is about the worst that Korea could have done. Like, it's hard to see how they could have done any worse, really. And they still got 2 teams top 8. One went out in group. Okay, that's not great, and obviously for Korea that's unacceptable. But I don't think there'll be a problem for next year. Like in terms of like where they go, like you say there, I don't really know on the Griffin team because I'm always a bit iffy on teams that have only had one split. Like I think you can't put too much weight on it. You got to see like who levels out, who turns out to be good. KT's clearly got the talent to be as good as they want to be. KT probably is the most mind-boggling one from Worlds because if they could have somehow gotten a read on the meta, they had all the pieces to do whatever they wanted.
Yeah,
and they had fucking Smeb. They could have just played through whatever lane they wanted. That's what's ridiculous. So, yeah, I think they just actually under pressure reverted to kind of like what Koreans think you're supposed to do in big pressure games. Who else is there? Afrika was a very weird one. I still to this day don't really know what happened in that series against Cloud9 because even the way they played, on paper, logically, should probably have won them the game. Like, I didn't think Cloud9 was looking that hot early in most of those games. Then you look at the fact that, like, they were trying to put everything through Keen in the top lane. And, like, I know obviously plebs are going to tell me otherwise, but I would go ahead and say Keen's a better top lane than Licorice. I don't think that's any sort of a diss, you know? So, yeah, all in all, it was one of the weirdest tournaments for Korea. To be fair, you know, they were due to have one. I mean, remember, we can add this to the infamous Samsung Ozone one where no one knows why they would just crap that Worlds even though they had amazing players. I guess it was due to happen once or twice. It shows how ridiculously dominant they are that we just take it for granted they're always going to be in the finals, right?
Yeah. But, I mean, it did seem... So it was not just Worlds, like China throughout the other tournaments was beating Korea as well. So at least there's some...
Sure, but a lot of that was RNG, though.
Yeah,
like that's also the saddest thing about this Worlds, mate, is like... RNG also, I mean, part of it is they got a bit fucked because they took the jungle sub instead of Zitai in the top lane, who would have played the carries. Yeah. So that hurt a little bit. But even beyond that, I genuinely think that's an example of a self-fulfilling prophecy where they decided themselves that the way to play the game was through the bot lane and through ZI, and that you just do everything through ZI and he'll win you the game. It's like they bought their own press. Whereas the bizarre thing is, that team absolutely could have done almost anything it wanted. Another very, very strong team that had many styles of play. Like, if you watch this Worlds, you would think Xiaohu sucks. If you watch the fucking last Worlds and the world before that, he was a pretty fucking good player. So I think that's unfortunately one where that was probably like a coaching misread, if anything.
Yeah, I mean, after so many games and scrims apparently of winning every single time, I guess they just got like overconfident.
Yeah, as bizarre as it might sound, like this is something that must be different about League of Legends and CS, because I've always thought another thing that people don't appreciate about League of Legends is it's one of the hardest games to actually train. Because think about how many variables go into one game. And because we don't have rounds, like you can't go, we'll recreate round 7 where I was, like 3 AWPs and 2 Galil. You can't do that in the same way that you could in a scrim or that you can from just playing lots of scrims. Every League of Legends game gets to a different point in the game that's like not exactly the same with exactly the same comps as you had last time. So actually practicing some stuff is going to be fucking hard. And if you notice, there is a long history of these sorts of stories where there's a team that shits on everyone in scrims, like can't lose in scrims, and then actually doesn't always win. As bizarre as it sounds, And part of the reason, is because unfortunately, literally almost everything you do probably works in scrims. So you're like, right, I can do whatever the fuck I want. Like if you won 40 scrims in a row, I can't really blame you if you then go to Worlds and you're like, nah, this will work. Why not?
It's G2, that's very
logical.
Yeah.
And also, unfortunately, like, again, this is where the one thing I'd love to know after each Worlds, I wish we could have this info, because in theory it shouldn't harm anything now, is I'd just love to know after Worlds which teams did scrim against each other and when, like what their scrim partners were in the tournament. Because again, like, could RNG have had any way of anticipating that G2 could have beaten them? Like, if they scrimmed them, I'd go ahead and guess that G2 wouldn't have beaten them. So, that's kind of a tough one to tell.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't even want to scream G2. They probably thought, we're the best, we'll just scream Koreans, maybe.
Well, that is one thing I will say is, like, I think there was even some intimation of that at this Worlds, that like something like KT and RNG just eventually were only scrimming each other or something stupid. That's another problem that I will say is a very Asian mentality, which is like, right, we're on top now, so let's just lock these other fuckers out with scrims so they can't get better by playing us, which is like, on a level, they're kind of right, you know, you do need to scrim people to get a good sense of who they are, but you also, the obvious downside of that is you can then end up in a scenario where you play someone who would have scrimmed you earlier and you'd have figured out more about them than they would have you, but you've now tried to like be a little bit too cute with it, and now maybe you just aren't fully prepared for them. There's a world that can happen as well.
Yeah.
One thing that's a bit depressing is like all those messages on Twitter where like every single EU LCS player is like, I am allowed to explore new teams for the next one. You've seen all those like it's like the same exact tweet from every player, because they're obviously all being told like the wording has to be very specific or something.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I do think that now that, you know, Europe did well, I think basically everyone else might get hope from these worlds and try to build teams that could go far in worlds. Whereas before there was always the idea that, okay, it's 3 Koreans and someone else.
Yes.
And I think now, even if I'm Steve or someone else in NAM, I have a better story to tell to my investors.
Sure. The problem is though, like I actually think sadly that because Worlds featured so many Western teams doing well, I think it's full of like narratives that I actually think are bullshit. Like I'll go ahead and tell you one right now. I actually don't think that G2, you know, somehow did a great job this year and like practiced really hard and like, learned a lot of lessons. Like I saw G2 play like in Spring Split, you looked at them, they were like, well, they could never have won the split. It was Fnatic was a lot better. Then you go to the Summer Split, like they're not doing it fucking anything. Then they go to the Gauntlet. Okay, in the Gauntlet, they pick it up. Even then, versus some teams that looked pretty lackluster in the Gauntlet. They get to Worlds, play that fucking dog shit play-in stage. You're like, what even is this? In the group stage, fair play. They had some good wins, although hard to fully know the strength of those teams in that group. None of them end up doing anything. And then they get to the playoffs. Even the win over RNG was hardly like fucking dominant, you know? And then they got absolutely, utterly spanked by IG. So, like, I actually think of all the teams, the two teams I think benefited the most from this bizarre meta that emerged at Worlds was IG and G2, but obviously to differing degrees. Like, it still only got G2 to the semis, whereas
that's pretty good.
Like, yeah, no joke. I think literally IG doesn't win this Worlds unless this meta exists, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like in this meta, you never saw a fucking game that was like 35 minutes long or whatever.
Yeah, where Koreans
at least, you know, where the game was still like playable at that point in time, you know.
Yeah.
And that's actually why one of the aspects when like Loco and LS were arguing about this, I actually thought both of them missed actually, is that I've no doubt Koreans thought they had some game plan that would slow the game down like that and let them get to that point. So I'm not quite sure, because here's the thing, the Koreans usually prepare so well. I don't think they all went in and they were just idiots and completely misread the meta. I'm sure they thought they had some way. So that's one of those things where I'd love to know what their actual plan was versus what happened, you know.
Yeah, I think, I don't know who made the point, but from one of your talk shows, I think it is about, okay, in the past, in Korea, no one took that many risks. So they're just not prepared. They're like, oh, take a few risks, but no one would really go all out. So they're just, maybe that wasn't just in their prep. It's just different mentality of actually all-inning all the way and picking scrims in the middle of in the early game when people are not ready and they haven't set up wards, etc.
It's because the sad thing is, like, that is generally, first of all, the Korean approach. Like, if you notice, they try to win, like, basically, they just try to play like Astralis League of Legends. Like, you try to make as few mistakes as possible, punish every mistake the opponent makes, get any small, edge and transfer it to the whole team or to an objective. Like, that's a great way to play League of Legends. I am actually amazed no one could make it work at this World. It's like, it's kind of crazy to me. I mean, I guess to some degree they did, because again, you know, KT only lost in 5 games. I know they could have lost 3-0, but, you know, they still had some pretty good games overall. So I guess some teams came close. I think that's also, unfortunately, where the worst thing to happen for Korea was fucking Gen G winning that gauntlet, because they obviously came in with like 180 degrees the wrong style for this meta, and they just could not ever make it work. So they were like free meat as soon as they turned up to the tournament, sadly. Whereas if you put any of the other Korean teams there, so it could be Griffin, they were fucking amazing during that follow meta period. You have, I would even say, as much as people might laugh, when you consider it's a solo lane tournament, I think a Freak of Freaks could have done, not a Freak of Freaks, King's Own Dragon X could have done really well in this tournament. Think about someone like Khan would have just gone ham on this squad.
Yeah.
It would be amazing. So, like, we normally don't think of that for Western regions, but I think for Korea, it is significant who qualified in the end, because the Griffin one isn't entirely their fault either. I know they did lose the final and the gauntlet, but it's also because they didn't play the spring split, so they were super low on circuit points in that sense. So it's hard to 100% blame them. Obviously, the Kings or Dragon X one, that is entirely their own fault for not qualifying. But yeah, they obviously had a fantastic chance to, so I can't blame anyone for that one. I also think that's why, by the way, that Worlds actually does fucking suck in League of Legends. There's one reason no one ever thinks of that why this tournament is bad, is that look at the other tournaments in the other big esports games. So look at like CSGO and the major there. Imagine if you had regions and you only had like 3 or 4 teams from each region. Like think about it, it would have been impossible. Gambit could never have won. Gambit could never have won PGL Krakow. They wouldn't even be there, would they?
The best region in the other esports, or like Dota with just 2 or 3 Chinese teams.
Exactly, same with TI. Like obviously in TI there's less regions, but even so, like because of the way the qualifier system works and the pro circuit system works, you could in theory get as many teams as you want from one region. I think, well, probably the most is about 7. They have to get all the pro spots as well, but. Yeah. The whole point is you could have that, whereas that's the thing that does suck about League of Legends. Like you're going to tell me somehow that like teams like Cloud9 deserve to play Worlds more than Griffin or King's Own Dragon. Why? On what basis? They won't compete against the same people. It's objectively not fair. So it's not the end of the world. Like it's just the world you have to accept, unfortunately, because they're never going to change that in Riot's league. But it does suck compared to other esports games.
Yeah, especially now with the trend of Overwatch and so on, of having these leagues as the main thing. I don't think they would revert back, because it was, I think before there was the argument of you're the only ones doing this, you're stupid, whereas now like nope, we're still here, so we're doing this forever. That's right.
Oh, there are certainly some things that are just set in stone and by the way, usually for no good reason. Like one thing I really hate, this is something that a lot of people don't appreciate as well, is that whenever they make a change, right, there's always the sort of person who's like, oh, don't be afraid of change, just let's see how it works, etc. But another reason why it's very dangerous to let like a bad change come through for a bunch of years is then it just becomes the status quo. So now people just accept that that's what we have. And the worst thing is in games like League, I'm not joking, there are people who just don't know what a double limb tournament would look like. They've never seen one actually played out, or they've never seen one with really good teams in, at least, so you get the same excitement. Yeah. And they would naively argue in favour of the current system just because they've enjoyed past Worlds tournaments. So they're not wrong, they did enjoy those tournaments, but they just don't know that they actually would have more fun, perhaps, with a better system. So unfortunately, like that aspect of like tradition is actually whack to me. Like I would say, screw tradition, just get a better tournament format if you can. I mean, I would rather have it for CS. The upside in CS is, okay, we're probably never going to get it there either, but at least we get 2 majors a year. Like I always think this, every time Worlds ends in League of Legends, I always just think, my God, imagine if every esport was structured this way, and now I had to listen to someone just talking mad shit for a year because like Gambit won the equivalent of Worlds in CSGO, and we have to wait 1 year to see them displaced. Like that would be a nightmare, wouldn't it? It'd be so shit.
Yeah, or Cloud9.
Anyone, like anyone who basically flukes it would just be so garbage, especially because then you go the other way. Like, then whoever the favourite was who lost, history says they were never the favourite, which is so whack. It's like, obviously they were. They didn't win. Yeah, you're right, but they were still the favourite,
Yeah.
Whoever won wasn't the favourite, for fuck's sake, unless they're the best.
Yes, even in groups, just adopting GSL or something, just this stupid round robin with like some stupid matches at the end that really don't matter.
Yeah,
it's really, it's like they don't look at other esports. I don't understand.
No, I mean, sadly, they do that classic mistake, which I don't entirely blame them for, which is they look at their company holistically and they say, well, our whole company's succeeding and look, the numbers are great. We're leading the world. And it's like, You know what? You might even be right about all those things, but that's irrelevant to how good the games are and, how good the format is. Like, Like, you know, that would be like literally saying that McDonald's must have the best food in the world. Like, no, it's doing an amazing job selling it and they're doing a great logistical job, but obviously you could actually have much better food inside the restaurant, you know?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I think they'd probably do that angle. Because this is one of the saddest things, mate, is if you ever go and you meet game developers, most of them have very little understanding of the esports side. Like, even when they follow it, their version of following esports is like they know who Doublelift is. Like, that's their version, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't mean, you know, they understood the meta of worlds and what was going on with Katie Rolster and, you know, why did Doublelift's team. Like, they wouldn't be able to tell you any of that shit. And so the sad thing is, how can you even argue with a person like that when they kind of don't have any shared background with you? Like, if I start telling them about double elimination tournaments, it's like I made this comment on Twitter. They're just going to tell me something that's like not even like a level 1 argument. Like, this is like, I told this story on Twitter because Monty was posting about how something about, you know, why don't we have like double elim for worlds or something, you know?
Yeah.
And I just replied saying, like, you have to understand, Riot is a company where when they first began LCS, the playoffs, if you remember, only the final was a best of 5. The rest were all best of 3 games, even the semi-finals, and including at Worlds for season 2, if you remember. Yeah. And so as a result, I was one of the people early on arguing, like, I think I even went on Travis's show or something to debate this, like, you know, we should have best of 5s, like best of 3 isn't enough to decide who's the best. Yeah. And Freak came into this Reddit thread where I was posting this, right, and literally tried to counter my argument by saying, like, well, if best of 5 is better than best of 3, why not best of 7, best of 11, why not best of 69? And it's like, well, the reason why that's called, you know, like an argument for absurdity, because, well, the reason why it's not 69, we don't even have to debate that, it's just you wouldn't have time to do it. Likewise, best of 7, you know, that could run 10 hours or something. So that alone is a great reason why. Now, if he says that for me in the best of 5, oh, but we couldn't run a best of 5, well, you could. So you can see how that one's like not only different, but he hasn't actually engaged any of the argument about the best of 5 there. He's just basically made a silly comment, you know. It's like you saying, oh, I'm a bit thirsty here. Can I actually have a bit of a bigger drink? And I'm like, why don't you just have a whole fucking pool full, you can't, and just chuck you in there? Like, that's not a reasonable response, is it? It's not even like the same context. So if you know that that's the world we come from, and like we're just lucky that years later they did give us gradually some of the things we want, I think it's just asking a bit too much to expect him to like put a fucking TI style bracket. It just isn't going to happen, mate.
But even when they do have, you know, I mean, Overwatch League has Monty, and they still do some really stupid decisions in terms of.
That's because he gets very little input in that sort of thing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Like, put it this way, he gets more than people do in League of Legends. But again, this is why I always stress the fact that, like, I'm not one of these people who, like, kisses the arse of developers. Like, most of them don't give us the time of day. So I don't know why the fuck I would be super nice to these people. Like, what happens with a developer is they might let you send them an email saying, like, oh, I think this is bad. And then they might just go in their brain, what the fuck does he know about games? And then just delete the email.
Yeah.
You know? So I've no doubt, yeah, he's probably told people, you know, I think this format's bad, like, we've got to improve this. But that doesn't mean they're going to do any of it, sadly, especially because in their league, more than any other league, they, like, obviously this is hyperbole what I'm about to say, but they essentially don't care about the format of the tournaments. All they care about is making it a financially successful league. Well, part of the problem there as well is if you're an American, you are going to be stuck in this paradigm that tells you stupid things like that the NFL is successful because they do things with conferences and have divisions and, you know, you play like wild card matches. Like all these things to me aren't really the reason why the NFL is successful. These were like, you know, limitations it once had that it had to exist within. So unfortunately, not only are they going to want their league to be like that, but they're also going to be really tempted to do it that way because they know that the guy who is an NFL owner who's just bought a team is going to understand that concept if you tell him, you know. Whereas imagine trying to tell that guy, like, now we're going to have like a LAN circuit with like 4 or 5 events and like, you know, some of them are going to have double elimination. This guy's going to be like, what the fuck is that? Like, where's the Super Bowl of this sport? And you're like, oh no, there isn't one. And that's better, you know, because, you know, there's this one here and then another one. Like, sadly, they're just not going to buy into that idea, whether or not it's right or not. Like, by the way, I don't necessarily know that it's wrong. Like, a lot of this shit we're just testing out for the first time. Who's ever run a massive esports league? It's never happened before. So I can't claim that I know the answer. I just think that some of the, you know, solutions at the moment are pretty bad.
But I do think that at least League tries. It's not tries, or they think in their head that they're trying to make a good tournament. Whereas,
no, they're not cynical in that sense. They genuinely do think they're making a good event. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that famous thing they always used to say. It was a real argument again in the early days of LCS, which is that it will make the Worlds final better because since these teams haven't played, you'll be so excited to watch them play that it'll be like the ultimate match. Now, what's weird about that is I sort of know what they mean because it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, in my opinion, which is if that you make it so that you can only meet once and it's at Worlds, then yes, it will be very exciting for that exact reason, because that's just the world you've made have to exist. Like, that's the first time the teams you really want to see play can play, therefore it's super exciting. What I think they ignore is that if they can meet multiple times, it doesn't tend to generally get any less exciting unless like one team just wins 100% of the time or something. And if anything, the times that they've met usually make the next time they meet cooler in some ways, I would say personally.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously that argument was ridiculous at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I can see, again, why someone who didn't come from esports might think it, you know, someone who only did watch a traditional sport, because again, in their world, like, I mean, I personally just consider it not a very satisfying sport to watch. Like, imagine watching a sport where it's like, I can't wait to see these two teams in the playoffs. Oh, what's that? Oh, we lost. Right. Well, hope for next year. Like, you know, like that's kind of whack to me, but that is real sports for you.
But it does keep, I think their rationale is just they want to keep the fans in these lesser regions. Lesser, I mean, in terms of quality, like NA, if they were getting better every tourney, and it's like, well, maybe I shouldn't be a TSM fan, maybe I should be a KT Rolster fan. But since they only do it once a year, it's not. So they prefer it like that. I don't know. It's
sure. The problem with that as well is, again, unfortunately, we can't really know that sort of thing. Like, you'd need to run some sort of study, you know, and find out why people do things. It's really tough to know any sort of like behavioral aspects like that. Because again, it's stuff I like to know personally. I noticed that no one's ever actually done any studies on it. It's like in Starcraft where they just told us a million times, yeah, the reason why Starcraft died is because Koreans were winning too much. I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I mean, you're the tournament organizer. You have all the data for your matches. Just go ahead and show me a report showing that when two, like, you know, faceless Koreans play, they get no viewers, and that when, you know, whoever Nurture or something plays a Korean, the numbers go up. It's very easy to prove this, you know, when you've got all the data. And I noticed they not only didn't do that, but in fact, when I privately tried to investigate exactly along those lines, a lot of them were telling me stuff like, we don't really keep those numbers around, or like just lying basically and trying to tell me like they wouldn't give me any of the numbers, which, by the way, has its own sort of sinister implication if you think about it, right?
And ironic now that Cyril won and it's still a dying esport, so it's
almost like it didn't matter, right?
Yeah, all this hype. I still thought it was cool, but yeah, I guess.
Sure, of course.
It's not changing anything.
No, because if like, unfortunately, the probably the dirty secret about esports is no one knows why a game gets massive. Like, you can have an amazing game, that might help. You can have a really great scene, that probably helps as well. You can have the right sponsors and, you know, the right amount of teams come in. All these things could happen though, and you still might never get a massive esport. Sometimes you get a massive esport, you didn't do half those things right. So to me, a lot of it's because I always give this example. It's like when the internet first got really popping off with like YouTube and stuff. There was a lot of idiots at companies who were like, all right, all we need to do is make a viral video. Like, if we make a viral video with our product in, we're going to get really rich. And what they didn't realize was, like, obviously the fucking kid who sits down and does some like little funny thing that we all watch, you know, he didn't really know he was making a video that tapped into that like perfectly, you know. Like, no one can really do that. So as a result, there's always like a bit of luck. And even worse, once something's happened and you try and figure out a reason it happened, you're not actually doing anything scientific when you do that, because the whole point is, because you're just giving a reason to something that happened, you're not actually testing that your reason's correct. You're doing it after the fact. Like, to really know why something happened, you'd have to use the logic of what happened there to predict something in the future. So
yeah, and you need a bigger sample size. Like, you could just say, okay, a league is big because it has a huge player base. And that could explain basically everything. They could have done whatever, it would still be huge.
Well, that's always been, you know, one of my base assumptions. I mean, again, I wouldn't claim it's like a fact, but that's one of the reasons why I'm not very impressed with Riot, put it that way. It's like whenever they look how many people we've got on the stream and stuff, it's like, mate, you have more people overall. Like, what are you talking about? Like, if anything, you're doing worse than some other people by not having crazy high numbers compared to people who have, you know, a third of your player base. Yeah. So, yeah, that is a tough one, because, again, if you notice there, depending on what context you put in, you can make Riot look amazing, you can make them look like idiots, you can make them look somewhere in the middle. It's tough to know on those ones.
Yeah.
Did you actually think Worlds was good, though?
I don't think so. I'm I am a bit, maybe from watching too much Summoning Insight, I did start to think like Monty, where I just want to watch rotations and teams playing well. And, you know, the team that should win wins instead of just random aggression. But as an European, I think it was cool. I think it will help the region, but I don't know. Let's see. It was at least different, which is good.
Because the big problem I had was, like, while the tournament was going on, yeah, I was excited because, you know, you're having all these amazing matches and you're having games where, even though, yeah, I'd agree the Korean styles look terrible, you know, it's like, it wasn't like they just bent over and just got wrecked completely. You know, there was also some good players, some people like G2 at times, and obviously IG looked amazing when they were in playoffs, and Fnatic did very well overall. But the problem is, as soon as the tournament ended, here's how I know it wasn't that great a tournament. Is normally, if you get really excited and you're following a storyline really closely throughout the tournament, once it ends, that sort of like crystallizes, and forever you'll remember, like, oh, remember that amazing run this guy had, or that sick match there. And I have to say, once the tournament has ended, fucking hell, I don't think there was many classic games in this run, mate. Like, I'm trying to think of all the games I saw at Worlds this year. There wasn't many that I would be picking in, you know, like a top 20 games of all time list. I don't know if there'd be any. Like there really weren't that many amazing games. And part of it was, unfortunately, like this meta where, yeah, it was just all about like stupid skirmishes. Like if they'd have at least been a logic to it when I watched it, like I do think generally, for example, IG and Fnatic were doing a really good job when they were doing it. So, like, yeah, they looked good. But there were some teams that it didn't look like they necessarily knew themselves that they were taking a fight where they're winning. Whereas, like, that's the thing I always loved about those Korean teams in the style you're referring to. It's like, it made perfect sense why they take a specific team fight at a time, or why they choose to force a fight around a certain objective. Like, there was a logic you could see it built up. And so even though I agree, at times, like there was a couple of years where League of Legends was pretty boring, like the meta, even though that sucks, it's somehow, there is something satisfying about the person who wins being the one who seems to have the better idea of what to do in the game, you know?
Yeah, even if you like comparing to CSGO, the majors that the Gambit and C9 won, just looking back, even though they had good runs, they had amazing matches, but it's still, that wasn't really like, they didn't, I mean, they deserved in the sense that they played in the day, but I don't look back and think, wow, C9 was amazing at that point in time. No, it's like,
yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's the other problem I have, is that, like, yeah, like you're saying now, the reason why people get so butthurt at the time when you call them flukes is because they want to believe that, no, C9 did just prove they were the best team at the tournament. You know, Gambit was just better than Astralis. It's like, as much as I want to believe that could be true, mate, like, it just, not only did it not show up in the next tournaments, like, if anything, reality proved that that's not the case, but it was already clearly not the case anyway. Like, you know, your own eyes could tell you, you know, this guy's having a way better game than normal. Wow, that's so crazy, you know, how well they played this one round that normally they'd probably lose. And likewise, I have to say, I don't think IG was the best team at this tournament. Like, I think they ended up playing the best in the playoffs, so congrats for that. But
yeah,
like, I also think that the other thing about this playoffs that's rough is I do think the bracket decided a lot of stuff. Like, after watching Fnatic play, I don't know if they would have beaten RNG in a best of 5, or if they could have beaten. If they would have beaten KT, you know, I'd be really interested to know. I actually was one of the people who thought they could. But I have to say, one of the reasons why is because I thought Caps was going to be way better than he was. Like, I thought he was kind of a bit underwhelming this world. So, as bizarre as it sounds, even though Fnatic came second, I don't really know if it was that crazy overall. Like, the placing's crazy, but was the actual run that nuts?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you beat IG a couple of times. Okay, cool. Then, unfortunately, you never even got to play a Freaker because C9 beat him. So, it's actually like, it's not really as sexy as it initially seemed, you know. I mean, I guess part of that's also because when they made the final, in my brain, it was like, they might win now, you know. So if they'd have won, that makes up for everything. But since they didn't, maybe we went a bit too far.
Yep.
I also just feel so bad for Soaz in that particular setting. Because the funny thing is, if you're an Asian team and you're a sub, congrats. You are now a key part of how we're going to win the game, because you're a really important player who isn't going to be a starter, but you're going to get playing time. This wasn't even like that. I thought Fnatic was going to do that, and I thought they'd even use it as more of a curveball, you know. Like, you think that we're going to play Whip or Hit, but now Soaz comes out. And in fact, Soaz comes out, and you think that means he's going to play a tank, but what do you know? Actually, we're going to let him play the carry. Like, I thought it would be like that. Whereas, when they just basically just decided to play Bripple almost the whole time until they just started losing the last, you know, the final, and they won the last game. Yeah. That's kind of whack to me. Like, I think actually they should have at least messed around with it a bit more. I mean, I know people are going to say, well, they won the games, didn't they? But Yeah, but I think you painted yourself into a bit of a corner once you got to the final.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they were going for the higher risk because they knew they were worse, and it's like SOAS is more stable, but we'll probably lose because we're worse. Whereas Bwipo might be a bit worse, but he could carry in some games. I don't know. I also thought they should have played SOAS. He has so much experience. He never chokes. He should have had at least game 2 in the final. But yeah,
if I'm him, I would 100% leave that team now. Because it seems like they want to just obviously.
Oh yes.
They think they're going to get years more out of Bwipo. If I'm him, there's so many teams you could go to, mate. So many teams that would be amazing if you joined them as well. So I hope he at least considers it, especially because obviously, I mean, I don't know obviously where Fnatic's going to be by the time franchising comes. Because in theory, remember, to get in a franchise, you're going to have investment. So maybe they'll have the money to pay him. But I also think he could get a massive payday elsewhere if he wants to keep playing.
Yeah, or just rebuild. I mean, I don't know if he wants that because he has been in so many big finals, but he could go to a team with rookies and just be the captain, or do like Taz is doing in CS:GO. It's like, okay, you're really, really good, I mean, it's not the same as Taz, but you can now do something else, and you're probably paid more than anyone else on the team because you're the face of the brand. But yeah, I don't know. Or maybe, I don't know, if Fnatic might want to keep SOAS, I don't know, it would be a bit strange. Maybe someone takes people away because he was very impressive as well.
Yeah, that's the tough one to tell because here's the thing. If I had to guess, because on Bwipo's end, he also kind of got brought in out of nowhere and didn't even know he was going to be playing. I'd imagine he's probably feels super loyal to the org in that sense. So I think the odds on him going elsewhere seem pretty low.
Yeah, that's possible. But I mean, he was playing in Turkey some years ago, and now he has probably good money. But unless they offer him more money, any of the other teams could offer him a lot, and that might be hard to say no. I don't know.
Sure, but in that particular case, mostly this is another thing about League of Legends, because people take every result as final. I think the odds now on Fnatic and G2 keeping basically these same rosters are very high, even though, for example, like I said on the G2 one, I don't think G2 is that great a team, mate. If I were them, I would be looking to make roster moves. I actually think for most of the team, the only players I would 100% keep is Perks and maybe Wonder.
Yeah.
The others, I would, depending on who's available, I'd consider a lot of different players on that team. No, I don't think so. I think he had some good games, he had some bad games. The sad thing I've realised about Jankos is, except maybe the year when he was in H2K in 2016, I'm not even sure on that though. I think my problem is, I probably slightly overhyped him because of how amazing his good games would be. And in his good games, he just looked beyond any other. Actually, to some degree, Dardoch in NA reminds me of the same thing. When they're at their good games, you're these guys are so much better than the other junglers. Fuck these junglers that just play for the team. These guys can take over the game. But the problem is, I can't say as much for Dardoch because he's a lot younger. He hasn't had as many playoff games. But having seen Jankos play a lot of playoff games, if you're going to be hit, if you had his skill set, you would ideally want someone whose mindset was right, I am a carry jungler, I'm going to take over the game. I'll tell you when I'm coming to your lane, set this up for me. Whereas Jankos actually has a much more fragile, mentality to the game, unfortunately. Yeah. And so, I wouldn't say he chokes outright. If you play a best of 5, I doubt he's going to throw 3 games, but he's definitely going to have at least 1 or 2 games that are going to be questionable. And I've seen that on all levels now, worlds and different teams. It doesn't matter what teammates they are. So, it's not that he couldn't work in G2, but I just feel in G2 they would have been way better suited with one of those Smithy type jungler dudes who just help the fucking lanes, Yeah,
I mean, it also depends on what team they want to be. If they really want to be, in the final of Worlds, yes, maybe they're going to need Xmitty. But if they want to have some good runs, he can provide. Especially if you're building around the solo lanes, he does get a lot of first bloods, or at least that's his.
Yeah, but the best part is knowing the way that these orgs are. They're not thinking what you're thinking now, mate, which is well, we did well, but would we need to upgrade to go to finals? In their mind, they're what do you mean? We're in semis. We'll just be better next year. We'll improve. We'll work on our mistakes, watch the VODs, and next year we'll be in finals. No problem. It's that's really the way that these fucking orgs work.
Come back stronger.
Yeah, the best example has got to be that Clutch Gaming team, where, you know, when they lost the semi-finals in the spring to 100 Thieves, and they did that whole speech where, like, that guy David Lim, the coach, like, gave him a whole speech like, oh, you know, I'm really proud of you guys, like, you know, we fought through so much this year, like, next year we're going to come back strong. It's like, you're not, like, you barely beat TSM, then you barely lost to 100 Thieves. Like, these weren't even the best teams, by the way. Like, at that point in time, that might have even been your best day. And if that's your best day, then you shit out of luck, as you found out. But in your mind, you're going, nah, it's my worst day. And why you would make that assumption, I don't know. And why would you, like, here's the part that doesn't make sense about the assumption. So what they understand is like, oh, I made mistakes, therefore I could improve them, right? Yeah, I agree. Now, what about your opponent? No, he just stays the same, and then I improve, and therefore next time I'm in the finals. Like, well, that doesn't work, does it? Like, everyone can improve. That's the whole point. And in fact, everyone is going to try and improve right after this. So unless there's some key factor that you know, like this player mega underperformed, or we didn't figure out exactly, you know, like Electronic and Navi, like we just didn't know that this guy was there the whole time, and we're super lucky that we've got this guy we can make twice as good now. Except for that scenario, you're just not going to be that good. So if I had to guess, I don't think GT was going to do anything with his fucking lineup. I think they'll just keep the same team and just be not that great at EU.
Yeah. What about TL? So I mean, it's almost the same discussion. It's like they have some very good players. They could rebuild. They have money, but I mean, they did smash NA. So depending on what they want to do, they could just keep the same guys.
Yeah. The tough thing about that team is like, again, this is another example of why I don't take Worlds as some like black and white brush that you have to paint everyone with, because I still think Team Liquid one of the best Western teams. They look fantastic. Like, yeah, they look shit at this Worlds, but then also, as far as we can tell, they had one of the worst setups of personnel to deal with this meta. Like, unlike RNG, who, yes, when RNG played this tournament, you would think them and Team Liquid are the same squad. Unlike RNG could have done other things. Team Liquid couldn't. Like you saw when they tried to like emergency put Bobelter on LeBlanc, like I don't know what you were hoping was going to happen. And then the one good thing about Team Liquid failing at this Worlds is that finally we've fucking been able to kill that narrative that I wanted dead from like 3 years ago, that Impact can play all types of top lane champions and that he just happens to play tanks because he's a good guy. Like, what fucking delusional world do you have to be in watching this guy's career to believe that? He's one of those guys where, no, that is his strength, is to play a tank. And he does a good job doing it. But if you put him on carries, or you just put him in a scenario where he's not playing basically like a tank, he's not going to be as good. That's just the reality. So their big problem is they really did send a single threat team to Worlds. And then unluckily, it ended up that the main damage threats on your team weren't even supposed to be in that fucking lane. So yeah, it's going to be tough to win at that point in time. You can add in other factors, you know, like having seen a bunch of these players play, there's probably some choking going on. There's probably people getting psyched out and whatnot. I don't know how you fix that, you know.
But
who does?
Do you think they'll make moves, or do you think they'll keep the player?
No, I think they'll keep the same players. Like, here's the thing: the only player I could see logically that you'd try and make a move for is to remove OllieJ, because he does use an import slot, and there are players that are very good that you could put there instead. The problem is there anyone in NA that's actually available that they can get in that sense? I don't know. Like, I think they missed a trick themselves, actually, which is, like, I know if you have the number one team, unfortunately, if you think you're going to win, you can't really remove a player from your team. I get that. But if they somehow could have been the ones who got Smoothie instead of Echo Fox, that's the move that you want right there.
Yeah.
Like, I think if he was with Doublelift, I think that would be the kind of bot lane they wanted in that sense. I think you still need to damage threat elsewhere personally, but who knows? Maybe this is again why the meta at Worlds in a way kind of sucks, because if League of Legends history has told us anything, this is the outlier. Like, we haven't had a meta like this basically ever in the LCS era. Like, even Season 3 Worlds, you were still generally playing tanks in the top lane by then, you know? Like, it wasn't like hard carries like there are now. So if I had to guess, it's way more likely that the world goes back to a world in which your top laner is your tank player, and as a result, your AD carry is very powerful because games last 40 minutes, and at 40 minutes, having 3 items on the AD carry means a lot, you know? So if we go back to that world, Team Liquid's fine, right? They've nothing to worry about.
Yeah, that's the thing, is they can win, and now they have Spring Split, so they'll probably, if they keep some players, they'll probably still win NA, and then they might get smashed to MSI, and then they might have to make a change, because I don't think Steve would be happy with going to Worlds again or out of groups again.
Like, while I will say it does seem like failing at Worlds follows Doublelift to whichever team he's on, at the same time, like this Worlds especially, I didn't think a lot of it was on him, to be honest. Like when I watched him in the games, he just never had a chance at times. Like people just feeding all over the place. And then, you know, even when he would be doing that decently in a game, the rest of the map was lost. It's like, I don't know what you want him to do at that point in time. Although I would agree, if it's happened to you like 5 times or whatever, yeah, you probably should start looking into that. It's not a coincidence anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, he's MVP candidate almost every season, so it's yeah. I think they would never remove him. I mean, I don't know.
It's just cute to me that like people had no problem flaming Doublelift on that for years, but like it wasn't until like basically last year that anyone even started flaming Bjergsen. It was just cool for him to just get banged out in groups every single year. I don't know why that was okay.
So what about them? What about TSM? Do you think they keep Sven and Mitty, or they keep the lineup, or do they have to change?
Based on the way they've done things so far, that's the big question, isn't it? Because unfortunately, since they peaked right towards the end of the summer split, and they didn't make Worlds, but you know, they weren't that far off. In their minds, again, this could be another team where they're like, no, Reginald, don't make changes, mate. Like, you know, this team's finally starting to gel. And, you know, if we'd have just had 2 more weeks, you know, we'd have done it. So, like, I could see a world in which they keep the whole lineup. I mean, in theory, you'd think jungle is the one position they have to change. But
yeah,
I could see them believing that it was, like, for example, the fact that they fired the coach is already a great excuse not to change the players. You go, right, it was the fucking coach. He just didn't know what he was doing, you know. Let's get this new guy in, Zix, or, you know, let's give him a chance to work with the players. Like, that's also another thing that sucks about League of Legends, is because you're not playing enough tournaments, you don't get to quickly see that someone's not that good. Like, if you notice this year in CS, it's funny that everyone, because, I mean, they're right. In terms of match predictions, I'm not very good at doing those. Like, those are tough to do. Mm-hmm. But in terms of, like, team, like, trajectory predictions, I have nailed this year so fucking hard. I said Mousesports would fall off when they kicked out Sticko. I said MIBR's changes weren't enough and that you were not going to become a top team. I said NIP doing slightly better at DreamHack Stockholm, and that was not enough to make them an elite team. Like, these are all factors, same as, like, everyone was telling me before the major, nah, Navi's not any good now, mate. They're going to fall right off. It's like, what are you on about? They're still amazing. Like, so, what about the FaZe Clan lineup? I think it was when they lost that V4 tournament. I even did that tweet that was like, this lineup has run its course. The Olaf Meister FaZe Clan. So, like, well, that's one of the few areas I do actually pride myself on. And part of it is just that, unlike other people, I've sort of tried to figure out what the timings are on when you get to your best point and then how long you stay there and then when you come down. And so, like, I think, unfortunately, not only in CSGO have most people not figured those out, but it's even harder to do in League of Legends because you don't have the same data. Like, at least in CSGO, I'm getting to watch actual tournaments. I can go, right, here's your 5 best performances. Here's your 5 worst performances. Let's figure out who this team is. Imagine if instead I was like, here's your 2 best placings. Oh, wait, that's it. There's only 2 for this year. Well,
last year,
let me figure that out to figure out who the fuck the best is. Like, who can even do that? It's impossible.
But if you take Reginald's personality, he has cut, he cut Doublelift. He has made harsh decisions based on better results than what they have this year. So he might just change things if he has money. I don't know if
I'd like him to. Like, here's the thing: people don't realize this. In terms of like a killer instinct, I think Reginald's got a very positive aspect in that sense. I think his problem in the past was just that, like, it might sound weird, but he always thought you could fix problems in the short term, which I think definitely doesn't work personally. Like, as I'm alluding to here, I don't think people get too much better. You can sometimes make someone like 5% better. Maybe you get amazing production to become 10% better. That might be enough to win if you're in a good team. But like, I think you've got to kind of like start with the foundation of the team and do as much work there. And then the whole thing is, then obviously if you get good, because he started off so strong, then you have an amazing team.
Yeah.
Like, if there's another principle people could go ahead and look at. How about this? Pick a team that became like best in the world and now go and show me the 4 months before they were the best in the world. For most teams, there won't even be 4 months. They just made the lineup change and became the best. For anyone who like doesn't become the best, I bet they were like second or third immediately.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you're going to find teams, mate, who were like 8th best and then worked really hard for 6 months and became number 1. As far as I'm aware, that doesn't exist. Like, that's a myth out of like Disney movies with like fucking kids trying to play hockey and stuff. Like, it's not real life, sadly. Now, the problem with that you have to realize already is, Like, let's say I did a whole study where I actually showed, like, you know, mathematically that was true and like all these patterns. Who the fuck wants to hear that? Who wants to hear that the players they've invested in now probably won't get better? And what's the solution, Thorin? Oh, the only solution is getting another player. And what's that? If I want a guaranteed player, I'm going to have to spend a lot of money. And if I want to gamble and get a rookie, he might just be shit and might be terrible himself. And what's that? After 3 tournaments, if he doesn't do well, I should kick him as well. Like, you can see how, unfortunately, the sort of general manager that might follow the things I've laid out doesn't exist, sadly. Maybe it's something I'll do in the future. I think I would love to do it as a job. It's just that, as you can tell, I would have to have someone who had, like,
money,
you know, trusted my vision for it, you know, like, wasn't just going to kind of like get scared after we make one roster move that doesn't work.
Yeah, there are more and more of these, you know, VC funds and so on that do in theory want to get the best fundamentals and then go with that. So they're not just, you know, randomly deciding based on what one person thinks. So yeah, I do see. I mean, maybe, you know, with so many Overwatch leagues with infinite money, maybe that's one. Yeah, I don't know.
What do you think? Do you think TSM will be a different team next year?
I don't know. Like, I don't watch the games close enough, but from what I understand, Mithi hasn't been playing too well. And I really like Mithi for a really long time, and he's obviously a genius for the game. But if he has not kept up, I don't think, you know, they can tolerate not having a good mechanical support. I mean, obviously he doesn't need to be the best, but he needs to step up his game. If he does, maybe they just keep the lineup. And yeah, if it does come back to a bot lane method that they have, Sven is great, and obviously the rest of the team is solid. So I could see them go both ways. But yeah, it depends on Mithi for me.
Okay. Is there anything CSGO related on your mind? Or anything else, League of Legends if you want.
No, I actually have a question on CSGO, basically on Simple's current amazing level. Just from your historic experience, has this been seen in any past greats like Forest and Neo and Kogu and so on? Or is this just a new level of domination? Of someone is the best player, at least rating-wise.
Like, one of the big problems with that topic is that, like, here's the thing: we did have stats in 1.6. Like, for example, there was a solid few years where we had them in North America with Gotfrag. Like, they had their own stat system with ADR and kills and stuff. And then actually HLTV themselves, for at least the last 3 or 4 years, had stats for every game. Yeah. The sad thing is this: Gotfrag doesn't exist anymore, so you can't access their database. And then HLTV.org literally just turned off the 1.6 stats database. And every time they've ever been asked about it, they claim something along the lines of like, oh, but you know, all the new things that we built for the CSGO database would break if we turned on the 1.6, so we just can't do that. So sadly, there's no way to actually know in terms of raw stats how good people were in every single year. Although I can, like, you know, vaguely remember some of the sort of kind of numbers we're talking about. Yeah. So I think part of the problem for me is that I have to mainly go by like eye test and what I remember. Mm-hmm. And if I had to go on that level, it's tough, because the thing is, like, when people like Neo were amazing, and when Marklov was amazing, and when Forrest had like a couple of years where he was really, really amazing. I mean, his career was a little bit overhyped, I have to say. People think he just did that for like 6 years. He didn't really, you know, he had a lot of help at certain times. Mm-hmm. But he certainly had a couple of years where he was like, you know, if not the best, absolutely stunning, very, very good player. The problem is, like, I would definitely say, because it's different games, you could compare those to Simple, but even with that taken into account, I don't think that they're actually as good as Simple is now relative to the game and the people he's playing. Because I actually don't think in CSGO you can carry as hard as you could in 1.6, because the fact that a lot more of the game, like, there wasn't a peeker's advantage in the same way, you could control the spray a lot more, you could tap the pistols. If you were a really insanely good individual player like Neo was, you couldn't win every time, because obviously you still, you know, your team has to do something, but you could be so insanely consistent. It was like unbelievable. The difference in Simple is, like, first of all, like I say, I don't think in CSGO you even can dominate that well. He's just doing it somehow. And then also you look at the way he's doing it. It doesn't even seem to fit the concept of his team. Like, it's not like they built a team around him and this person helps him in this. It's like he just does whatever he wants, it looks like. Like, he goes goes here, entries this guy, gets 2 kills elsewhere, wins the 1v1 at the end of the round. It's like, where did his team enter into that equation? You know, like, what were they exactly doing? Like, maybe I'm not seeing something and, you know, someone's doing some genius pressure push elsewhere that tricks you, but I've never seen a player that was that good individually and seemed to be doing it in spite of his team at times. Like, if you notice, almost every other all-time great player, think of even the CSGO ones, nearly always their team was number 1. Like, they usually had the best team and they were the best player.
Yeah.
This guy's doing it where, I know on paper he might be ranked number 2 or number 3, but I think realistically his team is not the best team in the world. I don't think they're even close. And yet he still looks so much better than everyone else. So, yeah, I think it's like an almost unprecedented. Like, put it this way, if people in CSGO are cheating, like top level pro players, then logically he must be, because he's just too good. Like, if he isn't, then I don't even almost know what the others are getting out of their cheats, because he's like too outrageously good. But then again, that's the reason why, in a weird way, you look at it and think, like, how could they be cheating? Because if he is cheating, then he's cheating all the time, like every single round, basically.
And for
like,
so long.
The sheer mechanical element to his aim is like, it doesn't matter how many times I've watched him play, it doesn't feel like it should be possible.
Yeah.
Like, even when I watch people who play, you know, Quake and Overwatch and all that, there's some really sick aimers in those games. I've never seen anyone who had this good aim, though. Because, like, I tell you the scenario to watch Simple in, right? Everyone obviously knows when he does, like, an insane deagle round, or he gets the AWP and dominates everyone. And by the way, that alone's insane. Because if you look at his style of play, he's clearly not an AWPer, but he's just so fucking good that, fuck it, just give him an AWP anyway, just kill everyone that way. Yeah. But the maddest thing to me is, if you ever watch him play, like, a pistol round, where he's in a situation where it's like, you know, 1v2 or something like that, and he knows basically you can't, like, just spam, like just do like every pro would, just spam the bullets when they come around the corner and hope you get a headshot. Like, he has to be very precise. His first bullets when in those sorts of rounds are, like, literally inhuman. Like, the way you track the head just doesn't look like anyone could do it. Now, what's funny is, I can already tell some people are going to take this whole thing now and think that this is like some mad rant that I have that he's actually cheating. Whereas my point is, like, I'm doing it the other way. I'm actually saying he is so good that it seems as though it should only be possible through cheats. Because, like, I've just never seen this level of, like, raw ability before, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, the team isn't consistent in any way. So now they're winning a tournament and then they're going last place.
And it's not like, you know, if you look at his stats, it's not like it's him deciding whether they win or lose him, if you look. So it's kind of depressing in that sense.
Yeah.
Because the other thing about that people wouldn't realize as well is, unlike other people, I'm actually not someone who tends to get affected that much by recency bias. Like, you notice I don't rush out there and say when a team does something, oh, this is the new greatest team of all time. Like, I don't tend to do that, you know. I tend to, like, especially because what I do before I make those statements is I tend to go back and look and try and compare and see, you know, first of all, am I overhyping the thing that's hot now because it's hot now? But more importantly, am I, you know, fondly remembering something from the past from nostalgia only? Like, if I actually go and watch the games, will it hold up to the eye test? Yeah. And so the reason why, to me, Simple is so crazy is, when Cold Zero was putting up all those numbers every single tournament for like 2 years, if you notice, everyone else in the scene absolutely did hail him as the best player ever and was like, this guy's the greatest player we've ever seen. Whereas I have to say, the eye test never showed that to me. Like, to me, he looked like a really, really good player, but the eye test didn't show me like this is the best player in Counter-Strike. Whereas, like, you know, Olaf Meister was fucking amazing. Get Ryan Kenny S super sick at different points in time. Like, the difference is, when I even go back and look at those guys, Simple's just better than everyone, mate. Like, I don't know how anyone's this good at the game. It's kind of wild.
Yeah. I mean, it is for a long time now. I mean,
it's crazy, isn't it? Even
when he was in Team Liquid, it was like, what, 2 years ago? I mean, he was already doing insane things, and he's just gotten better. So it's
what's so crazy is, if you go back to even last year when they just got Zeus back, dude, even then the numbers are bonkers. And that's before, you know, they got the team together, they figured out how to play, they've got to be a top squad again. So, like, just the length of time that the guy's done it for already is impossible. Like, it shouldn't last this long. And for anyone who's thinking, by the way, that, like, what about Olaf Meister and Get? Like, they weren't lasting this long. Like, go watch, you know. Like, about the closest is probably Get Right. And remember, he was, like, starting out with basically the softest scene we've ever had in working his way up to a more competitive one. So...
And it wasn't like crazy aim. It was more like lurking and then just being better, game sense and so on.
Like, put it this way, compared to the other players, like, Like, to be honest, Olafmeister never actually looked that crazy mechanically. Like, he never looked like, wow, he's so much better than everyone else. Like, he had everything for me. He was like, he was like very polished. Like, he had good aim, but then it's like how he used his aim, and then it's like his playing style perfectly fit his skill set, which fit what his team needed in his role. Like, that all sounded amazing. But the difference is when you look at Simple's game, unless this guy is literally going to not be able to aim as well, like, unless he's going to lose like 20% of his aim, why can't he just keep doing this for the next year? It's not even that crazy anymore to imagine. It just looks like he could do it.
Yeah, Nova at Crims. He's just alone. Or, he obviously has Electronic also fragging, but it's not the same. Nice.
Yeah. And the thing is, his team is still good. It's just that, funny, I guess it ties into that League of Legends conversation, right? If anything, Simple's his own worst enemy, because by doing amazingly now and helping them win a tournament, that makes them in their brains go, see, this team's fine. Why would we need to make a change? And then they don't make a change, and then they do badly, and then people go, well, your team was winning before, Simple. Shouldn't you be doing better, son? And then it's like, so then he does well the next tournament, and then they're like, well, see, no changes needed. Navi won the tournament. It's like, fucking hell, how do I get a break here? How do I get a break?
Yeah.
What's he supposed to do?
But do you think Navi as a team is at the level they want to be, or should they try to go for number one? Because at the moment they're not close to Astralis. I guess no one is close to Astralis, but
they're not. But you have to realize, like, in their minds, they are. And I don't blame them, because if you think about it, if you look at the world circuit now, except for Astralis, if you're Navi, of course you think you can beat everyone else. Team Liquid didn't even make it to the Epicenter final, so you're not worried about them anymore. FaZe Clan, very up and down, mouse spots, like who the fuck knows. Aside from Astralis, you're in great position. And you know what? If anyone beats Astralis for you, there you go. There's your chance to win the tournament. So in a way, I get it. It's just that I agree with you. Like, if I have to assume Astralis stays good, yeah, they're never going to do it in Navi. Like, how could they? And in fact, one of the things that really tilts me is that because of that fucking Epicenter final, they've gone back to doing the stupidest vetoes of all time. Like, I don't know if you saw how they went out of this IEM Chicago, but when they played against Big, they picked Inferno as their map pick.
Nice.
It's like, okay, well, congrats. Yeah, the reason why that's so sick to me is because Navi has one of the best map pools we have in this entire game.
Yeah.
And now they're just picking stupid shit.
Maybe they were tilted from losing to United or whatever. Yeah, it's strange. Yeah, I do think that, right now in the other top CSGO teams, is there anyone that's close to Astralis? Because when I look at the top 10, it feels like none of the other teams feels like, okay, this team is really good and they're going to win some tournaments now. Only Astralis has that idea, at least in my head.
Sure.
So is it going to continue like this? Should the other teams make a move, or should they just wait out and leave Astralis be because they're not going to beat them as they are right now?
Well, the problem is there's so many other teams that just haven't made a roster move in ages. So, like, if you are, Navi's won. Navi's had their roster line a long time now. Remember, I think the first land for Electronic in Navi was DreamHack Winter. I think that was the first one. So that's like almost a year they've had that lineup. I don't know why they can't consider making a move. Then you've got FaZe Clan. It's almost certain they're going to have to make a move eventually. So they may as well get on with it if you ask me. Yeah. And the problem with a team like FaZe Clan is they're just holding up a bunch of talent that could be doing things elsewhere. Like, you could split this team up and make two teams that could challenge Astralis, but instead you're keeping it all in one and not doing it. Then you got Team Liquid. I actually think they're the only team that's probably good enough already. Mm-hmm. Just they have to get over whatever psychological issues they've got. So I can't really know if that's going to happen, because if you've ever followed like high-level sportsmen who have that kind of issue, it's like a floodgate scenario where beforehand you'll just never win, but the second you break through and you win, you might just win everything.
Yeah,
like you can just go, because obviously if you get over the problem and you really were that good, hey, you might just win the next 5 tournaments in a row. Why not? It can happen. So Team Liquid's the only one I see of the current squads where it's like, I at least could see it happening. Difference is, FaZe Clan could potentially win against Astralis, but I don't think FaZe Clan's going to ever be number one with this lineup,
Yeah. But Liquid, in terms of matchup, because they're similar to Astralis, right? They're like consistent, they play well, they play good Counter-Strike, but Astralis is just better. Whereas FaZe is more, we have superstars. If Guardian and Nico are on, we will win.
Well, the key for me is this, like the big problem Team Liquid's had generally is that it's so rare that other people beat Astralis. Like, remember, there's also the world in which Astralis can just get 10% worse. Why not? That it's going to happen eventually. So whenever that will be, first of all, then all of a sudden they lose a couple of tournaments, they lose a tournament to whoever you want. Maybe North's really good by then. I don't know. Maybe they lose a game to FaZe, or they lose to, MIBR, someone that can just give them a game once. And then if you're Team Liquid, that's when you swoop in and win the tournament, hopefully. Now, they haven't done it so far at these tournaments where there was no Strauss. So yeah, it's starting to look a bit bad. Like, it's starting to get so that you can't even use that angle anymore. But it's not impossible. Like, they've just got such young players. It is crazy how much potential they actually have as a squad. Sadly, I do think that most of the squads in the top 10 are played out as fuck. Like, I think if you look at, like, great examples, MIBR, I don't think that team's going anywhere. They've capped out completely.
Yeah.
I don't know how much better Mouse Sports can get. Like, the big thing for me is, if you look at a team like Big, they should have no business being a top 10 team in the world.
Yeah.
But they can be, because they actually have a decent fundamentals, good setup, they adapt between games. If that can get you in the top 10, yeah, I agree with you. The top 10's a bit whack, like, it's a little bit too soft. And in this case, it's one thing if we just made these lineups and we just haven't seen yet. Almost every lineup now, I think it's kind of run its course. We need to do a shuffle, basically, I think.
Yeah. So speaking of shuffles, what about your friends G2 and Existence? Do you think they will turn it around, or are they just stuck in not good mode?
The problem is, every time I watch them, they just look like the same team, which is kind of a bit depressing because of how much time they've had. So, yeah, I personally don't think this lineup's going to go anywhere different. I think you've sort of seen their level. And by the way, as you see, they can absolutely play a map or two against almost anyone and make it look good.
Yeah.
But they often still don't win those maps anyway, so those don't count. You have to actually win the fucking game. So to me, yeah, you've got to have some sort of roster move there. Now, I don't know how that works out because they've just signed all these players to contracts again. You're waiting to see what happens with the fucking Vitality team to see if anyone's actually good. So there doesn't seem, quite frankly, to be any sort of like a plan within their team to make a player change. And I don't really think they've got a set timeline of like, if we don't do well by this event, we're going to. So that's a bit depressing. The upside to me is, as long as eventually you make one of the hard decisions that you need to, I think that the base is there to be a good team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, basically, Shox and Kanies can always, if they start playing at their level.
Of course, yeah. I mean, Shox, I think, is still very good. Like, if you watched him play at the CS Summit, he was legit most of the games I saw. So he's doing his job. It's just some of the other players are a bit lackluster.
Yeah.
But I actually think if they get a better... Like, for me, this is why I don't really get why people talk so much mad shit on certain players and not others. Like, for me, teams like Big and G2 aren't that dissimilar. And yet what's bizarre is I see everyone praise within a team like Big exactly the things that G2 has as well, but then they just only diss the things that G2 doesn't have and never mention it for Big.
Yeah, that is true.
Like, you got to be consistent, I mean, remember, Big's a team that like went to that Star Series and didn't even get to the top 4.
Yeah.
And there were no fucking good teams there. They lost to Ents. Somehow they're allowed to do that and everyone's still sucking Godby's dick, telling them how brilliant he is. But if G2 beats FaZe and then doesn't go top 4, they're idiots, like, which is it, let's be fair here.
Yeah. What about those old, like, Fnatic, Cloud9, Virtus Pro? They're all really bad now. Do they have a way back, or are those... like, they'll just never be what they were before?
I mean, the obvious one is Cloud9, because since they've made so many player changes, they could still reset completely and get a good squad and be amazing a year from now. I don't really know what direction they're heading currently with the team that they have. Yeah. Like, some of those players are decent, so, I'll give it a try. We'll see how it goes. I don't really know what the logic of doing that going forwards is. Seems a bit like you've caught a lot of players at the downturn of their careers, so I'm not really a big fan of that. Virtus Pro's a wash. Like, just forget about those ones, mate. That's never happening again. In fact, the way it looks right now, after watching like the AGO lineup after the Snatchy left and then King win with Taz, it doesn't look like any Polish team's going to be good. And the sad thing about that is that's entirely logical. This is what people never understood about why I think Neo is the best Counter-Strike player ever, is that Poland never actually had a team that should have been a top team in the world. Even the lineups he was on that was winning. Like, the people should go back and watch the majors that they won, because they would win majors where they were like a big underdog coming in, and the way they won, you would think they were the favourite. Like, they would just get all the clutch rounds go their way. They would somehow win on the opponent's map. It's like something they were doing was impossible. And when people do impossible stuff, you don't go, why did you stop being able to do impossible stuff? It's like, if anything, it's how the fuck do you keep doing it that long? It's amazing. So mad props to him for doing it for that long. But unfortunately, I think it's logical that Virtus.pro dies out now. Like, you look at the Polish scene, who even are the top players that everyone's talking about? No one, basically, right? Not really any players at all. Then you go and look at the Fnatic side of the equation. Like, I like the Roland pickup. I think that's got potential in the future. He's probably still too young now, but, you know, in like a year or two, maybe he could be a top player. The Twist one's a bit depressing because it's like, as far as we can tell, he only joined because it's like the Swedish scene had to agree to kick him out to get him to go to another fucking team, you know? So I don't really know where you go with that one. But then again, one thing you can't really, I guess, underestimate with Swedish teams is, of course, a lot of what makes them good is like team play and aspects like that. That's the least measurable, like, you know, quality of a team. So if they suddenly get it, all of a sudden, you know, those players will look a lot better than you figure. Yeah. For me, the depressing part was that Crims's level went down because, like, he was the one person I felt like you had to have really good in that squad.
Yeah, I mean, he's the support, right? He's like, it would be hard to just him win anything. Thing is, these teams have so many fans. They should have money. They seem to have money. So can they? It just feels so stupid to have teams that are so well known and have such history just die out without, I don't know, revamping somehow.
Well, if you notice, except for Cloud9, none of them seem to be willing to try foreign players. Yeah. So in a way, it's kind of deserved. Like, I actually think that's something Sweden should start thinking about as soon as possible. Especially because one of the stupid things is, like, Norwegian people can fucking speak Swedish, mate. Like it might not be the most perfect Swedish, but they can speak and understand Swedish. It's a very similar language. So, like, the idea that somehow these people, like, can't play together, or, like, you know, it'd be so alien. Like, come on, mate. I mean, Mouse Sports is better than you, and they have all sorts of fucked up nationalities pushed together. So if you ever get a chance, if you're Fnatic, to get Rain or some sick player like that, give it a go. Why not? They don't have to be Swedish anymore. We've seen you haven't done a very good job of bringing talent forwards.
Yeah, and they all speak English anyway. I mean, basically 100% of the population speaks English. So.
Basically, yeah, all the Nordic countries except Finland speak flawless English, like really good level English. Like, I know they themselves might think they speak bad English, but that's how you know they speak good English, because you have to be good enough to know that you're not that great.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Right. Have you got one last topic you want to do? Have you got anything good?
I mean, we touched a bit on this on the Starcraft thing. I don't know if you have been paying too much attention. I know you retweeted the Serral win. Do you think that matters at all? I know this is a bit off the usual topics, but since Serral won now two tournaments with Koreans, is that significant? Is that just it's a dying game, so it's not very relevant, or does it mean that Koreans are not immortal in another game?
The big problem is I didn't watch the game, so I can't tell you from the eye test what it means. Mm-hmm. So for all I know, all this hype could be great and he is the best player in the world. Like, I mean, I don't think people are being entirely disingenuous when they say that. The big problem I have is, like, there's two factors I can think of immediately. One, he doesn't play in GSL Code S. Like, he plays in the WCS circuit, and there are foreigners who play in WCS Code S, by the way. Like, I think Scarlett made, like, I think she made top 8 this year, and I think Neeb made top 4. I think that's correct. And so there are players who've tried to, which is they're not winning it. And so, for example, in Korea, there was a guy, Maru, won all 3 of the Code S tournaments this year. So I don't really care that the other guy went and banged in a load of Westerners' heads and won their tournaments and got more money or whatever. Like, that, to me, that doesn't make you better. But with that taken into account, it's clearly an insane achievement. Like, it's still very, very hard to beat those Koreans. But all I would say is this. Go and look at, like, a GSL season. So you're looking at the best Korean players in Korea, and go and look who these guys are sponsored by as their team, and it will depress the fuck out of you, because there are, like, literally god tier GSL champion players who might win this season who are sponsored by small European esports orgs you will never have heard of.
Yeah.
Like these aren't, you know, like some, is this company from Taiwan or something? No, these are like, you know, a team from Germany, team from Switzerland. Like, you'll have never heard of these teams. So if those are the people that they're representing, that tells you what the health of their game is like. Then you add in the roster locking, meaning that Westerners are largely staying over in the Western regions. Yeah. And yeah, it's a nightmare. Like, in my opinion, it doesn't make the results as crazy as, you know, if this had happened 5 years ago, it would be amazing, obviously. Yeah. But to me, yeah, it is a bit whack that you've got all these weird limitations on it, you know. Because again, I thought one of the cool things about something like StarCraft is we can get past all the bullshit of countries and regions, and we can just have players, right? And if you, just like in CS, if you're a sick player from Bosnia, you can now be on a top team. You could be a player from anywhere and be amazing. Like, you think France had some amazing history in RTS games? Not really. It's had like a couple of players, but looked fucking amazing when those players were sick, though. But it's not about France, is it? You don't lock France out if they do mega well. So I think that the people in StarCraft 2, Blizzard obviously included, actually did ruin their game's competitive integrity by region locking, unfortunately. Like, I don't think they, or at least even if you were going to region lock, you had to do it in a different manner. Like, there had to be more tournaments where there was crossover. Yeah. So if anything, they just made like kind of their own shitty version of LCS for my money.
Yeah.
So it's not as cool. It's the same as in League of Legends, you know. Let's say Fnatic had one. Would that really have made the West better than some other region? I don't really know. I could say that, you know, like, it wouldn't really feel fair because you don't have the sample size. You're just going off one team doing sick, and that skews everyone else super high, doesn't it? So,
yeah.
Like, I actually think the person who suffers the most from this is Serral, because for all we know, maybe he is just so godlike that if you'd have had him in a proper circuit like we did 5 years ago, maybe he would be dominant. Maybe for all we know, they're literally robbing this guy from the best RTS career any Western player's ever had. But unfortunately, we can't know that. And it's not his fault. He can only do what he can do and play the people who are in front of him. And if I were him, I fucking probably wouldn't go and try and play in Code S if I could make mad money in these Western tournaments. I don't know, really. It takes a different type of mentality, unfortunately. And I think the fact that the Korean scene's degraded so much, I don't think it's a coincidence that the losses that they're taking have racked up as, you know, like almost like a inverse relationship between how strong their scene is and how bad their fucking results internationally are.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think we'll just leave it there. We've got a good chat in there. Got a lot of stuff done. I don't know why everyone else wasn't here. What I'll try for the next one, because I'll probably do one in like a week or so, is we'll try and do one that's like, I'll make sure like at least 3 or 4 people are available that night. I just had to do one now at this point in time because I just got home from my trip, so I wanted to just see, and there was supposed to be someone else turned up as well, but whatever. We did what we could do, mate. Cheers.
Cool. Cheers.
This video was kindly supported by Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, Tobias Bernasconi, OllieJ, NateDOhDoubleG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, James Harding, VeXii, Robert Baxter, Lucas Kerza Szczesny, and a special thanks, as always, goes out to my man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest to feature in my upcoming content? Perhaps you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA. Do you want teasers from my upcoming content? See who the next guests are going to be. Perhaps you'd like to take part in a discussion about esports with me. Well, any and all of the above exclusives are available for my patrons. So put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link below.